Welcome to the Love Lab Podcast, the place to be for honest and real talk about relationships and sex. Whether you're a man or woman, single or a couple, this is the show for you. I am your host, Kevin Anthony, and I am here to help you have the relationship of your dreams and the best sex of your life. All right, welcome back to the Love Lab Podcast. This is episode 340. And it is titled How to Deal with Rejection and Rupture Moments. So we're covering sort of two different things, although they are similar in nature. So the first thing we're going to be talking about is rejection. And rejection really is a part of dating. But what I find interesting is, and this is something I'm really interested to ask my guest about too, to see if he's seen a difference in this. But one of the things that I have seen is different, is that I find men are much more afraid of rejection today than they used to be. You know, back when I was young and, in the early dating years, like I can remember my friends, it was like they would just go up to as many women as they had opportunity and just ask them out. And if they said no, they moved on to the next one. And I know that there are still some men out there that do that. But one of the things I'm starting to see is, because I see it in my coaching clients, men who are struggling in dating. And when you really talk to them about how they go through the dating process, you find that they are massively intimidated to actually go up and talk to women. They fear rejection. So there's something that has shifted there. And now, aside from whatever has shifted there, what we really want to talk about is, how do you deal with rejection? And is it possible that you could potentially learn something from rejection? So we're going to cover that. We're also going to talk about rupture moments. What is a rupture moment? And how can that potentially help us? How can that potentially deepen our relationships? And so we'll dive into all of those things with my guest. But before we do that, a short word from my sponsor, Power and Mastery 3.0. Power and Mastery 3.0 is the latest version of the popular men's sexual mastery course. If you're struggling with erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation, or simply want to increase your skills in the bedroom, then Power and Mastery is for you. Join the exclusive club of men who have taken their sexual performance into their own hands and become sexual masters. Mastering your sexuality is a key component to becoming the man she has always dreamt of and craves. Don't leave your sexual performance up to chance or the throw of the dice. Become a sexual master today by going to powerandmastery.com and joining the exclusive club of men who have taken their destiny into their own hands. That's powerandmastery.com. Okay, my guest today is Danny Salinas. Danny is a relationship coach and men's work facilitator dedicated to helping high-achieving men and women create fulfilling partnerships full of ease and intimacy. Certified in integrated attachment theory and having personally overcome an anxious avoidant attachment style, Danny blends firsthand experience with research-backed healing methods to help couples resolve conflict and connect deeper than ever before. Welcome to the show, Danny.
Thank you, Kevin. Really appreciate you having me on, and I'm excited to get into it.
All right. Well, let's just dive right in. Let's start by defining rejection in the context of dating and relationships. So let's talk a little bit, just explain to the audience a little bit, what are we talking about when we say rejection?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because honestly, rejection is just a word, and, and it manifests more so as a feeling of inadequacy in a man. That's really what it is. And like a man can sort of take something that a woman does and perceive it as a rejection, even if it wasn't intended as one, right? And also a man can take a seemingly obvious rejection and not actually feel a whole lot of inadequacy in his body, and thus not actually feel rejected. So this is really important, because that's just a word, but to define it so we can kind of get, on so we can sort of link up on like what we're trying to say when we actually use that word. Let's just say that a man has a particular motive or intention, and a woman is not open to that particular motive or intention. That could be considered, let's say, a rejection.
Yeah. And so one of the things I wanted to sort of mention or sort of clear up is because when we think of rejection, we totally think of it as being in the dating space. You ask a woman out, or whatever, you approach a woman and she says no in some way. Okay, that is a form of rejection. But the way that you defined it opens up a much larger definition, right? Because you could be in a relationship. She's not rejecting you in a sense of she doesn't want to go out with you because you're in a relationship, but maybe you're making a request for something, and that could be a request for sex. That could be a request for having a conversation about something maybe that's difficult, right? Where you could feel that sense of rejection because your partner isn't saying yes to whatever that request is that you have.
Exactly, exactly. And so yeah, like the more broader definition, because it definitely applies to not just the dating space, definitely in the relationship space. And I think it's helpful for guys to recognize that, oh, that is what's coming up for me. That is what I'm feeling and experiencing in my body is a form of rejection in my partnership. And that may not be the first thing that guys oftentimes jump to because they're like, oh, I already have her, I'm already in this relationship. So but rejection you can experience rejection on these subtle ways that have nothing to do with her rejecting you as like her partner, but rejecting maybe an aspect of you, a part of you, an aspect of your character, a certain desire or fantasy that you might have, right? And so oftentimes what I see, and maybe we're getting a little ahead, but I'll just kind of tease it a little bit, is that because guys have this fear of rejection, that they will be rejected, right? Is that then they actually keep what they're actually feeling and thinking and desiring inside. They don't express it radically, honestly. And that causes resentment in them to build, which then creates a chasm in the connection.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that you gave some specific examples because, like I started to say, people think of rejection as okay, I approached a woman and she said no. Or in the context of a relationship, I asked her for sex and she said no. Like those are easy to understand. They're sort of in your face, right? Everybody's experienced them at some point. Like it's easy to understand. But some of the other examples you gave are not quite as easy to understand. Like, you said maybe she's not rejecting you as a whole, but she's rejecting an aspect of you, which might be one of the ways that you show up as a man. She's rejecting in some subtle way, right? That maybe isn't quite as obvious. And maybe you as a man don't actually identify as rejection. But as you also clearly stated, is those things can lead to built up resentments over time, even though you as a man may or may not be aware that they're there.
Yes, exactly. And if we want to maybe dive into and share other examples, I'm happy to do that as well. So we can make it maybe a little bit more practical in all the subtle ways that shows up. Or, we can just move on, I guess.
Well, let's do that. Let's make it a little bit more practical. Let's give at least one good example of a subtle way in which rejection shows up in a relationship.
Yeah. So, I mean, even just something as simple as like picking the restaurant to go eat at or watching a show like a movie like for the night, Netflix and chilling, or so like those are two I think very relatable things. And you can kind of fall into the trap on either end of the spectrum, right? You can fall into the trap of, and they sort of are intertwined. So I'll explain it. It's like if you want to watch a particular movie and then you know that your partner is not going to want to watch it, or you're afraid that your partner is not going to want to watch it, or the same thing with like you want to go to a particular kind of restaurant, but you're afraid that your partner is not going to want to eat there, then you might actually just not even express it. And I do see guys fall into this pattern where it's just like they start to accommodate and just it's sort of like, what do you want to eat? Right. And like, where's that coming from? Like in this subtle way, it actually comes from a fear of rejection and also kind of can come from a disconnection of your own needs, right? Not even knowing what it is that you really want because you've just learned to sort of mold yourself to what your partner wants, what she wants, right? And I think there is such a thing as like masculine containment, right? And attuning yourself to the feminine energy and like providing and protecting and all of that. But there's also something to be said for the other side of the masculine energy, like the one who knows like what I want and I'm gonna go after it, right? And so it could be something as simple as instead of saying like, "Hey, baby, where do you want to eat tonight?" Right? Because then you're putting the responsibility on her. Is saying like, "Hey, you know what? I'm feeling this. I would love to get this. Like, do you want to join me?" right? And that's a completely different sort of approach. You're still giving her the option to, you're not saying like, hey, we're going to eat this, but you're saying like, I'm the one who's expressing a vulnerability by putting my desire out there, right? And saying, this is what I want. Right. And two, I think too often we don't do that either because again, we're afraid that we're going to get rejected or maybe be judged even, which is another thing that I would like to talk about at some point, which is like the rejection. Sometimes what I find in my work is that there is a rejection, but there's also this other kind of core wound that comes up of like, I am bad or I will be bad. Right. And that's like kind of connected to the judgment part. So it's either that or there's just the simple fact that I don't even know what I want because I don't even like I don't even go in and check and feel into it. Like, what do I want to eat? What do I want to watch? Right.
Yeah, those were all great. And then I love that you brought up that example because it's one I use all the time. I usually use that example in the context of like trying to help men understand what it means to have sort of a strong masculine container, like you were saying earlier, which is that, rather than going through the whole, well, whatever you want, well, just tell me, like that sort of thing, which most of the time women don't, I shouldn't say most of the time, often women don't actually know what they want, right? And so they're hoping that you'll provide some guidance. It doesn't mean that they necessarily are going to say yes to everything that you say, but I can't tell you how many times, a woman has said, well, like, just give me some options because I don't even know what I want, right? So I'm often using that example in that context of you as the man need to show up and provide some container and say, okay, I have an idea. How about we do this, right? And that's kind of similar to what you're saying. What I like also is you gave a little bit more nuance to it by saying that there could be multiple reasons why he's not doing that. One is he might not know for himself what he actually wants. One, he might be afraid of rejection. And two, he might somehow think that, she would think he's bad in some way. And so that's really interesting because, that's showing that there's some self-worth stuff there potentially for the man to look at. It's like, well, one, why don't you know what you want? Why didn't you figure out what you wanted before you asked her? Why are you afraid that she's somehow going to think that you're bad simply because you made a suggestion, right? This is where like some of that, kind of BS toxic masculinity stuff comes in, where it's like, if I say this is, what we should do, somehow I'm being the toxic masculine, right? And so they want to avoid that. So then they get into this pattern of not actually stepping up and not making suggestions, which then, winds up being a negative feedback loop because that annoys the crap out of her. So yeah, it's really interesting because it's such a simple example, and yet there's a lot of nuance to it, and there's a lot of things that could potentially be going wrong in something as simple as a communication about what where you're going to go eat. So simple example, but great in illustrating, the types of things that can happen. So you can take that example that you just gave and you can apply it to, a myriad of potential interactions that you would have with your partner that could end up going in similar ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And, something that's coming to mind as far as like a little action step or something, a very practical exercise that I've done with myself in order to kind of help flex my sort of decision making muscles, right? And also to work through that feeling of like, oh, maybe I made a wrong decision, a wrong choice or something, right? And which is connected back to that, like I'm bad, like I made a bad decision and thus I'm bad. Because, yes, bringing it up is like a little mild form of that. Like, oh, maybe I bring it up and maybe she doesn't want it and I'm going to feel like judged because of it. Or what, from my experience, has been more relevant is like, we actually do go to this restaurant. It's a new restaurant. I suggested it. And then it's like, well, what if the food is bad? And what if like the service is bad? What if she doesn't like it? And then I'm like, oh, like I made that decision. And then kind of sitting with that feeling of guilt, like, oh, I made a poor decision. And I know for me, what was helpful to step into my own masculinity is to like really practice just owning our decisions and like being sort of detached from outcome and just owning it and not apologizing for something because it's like that's sort of like the risk of leadership, right? Is that that is what leadership is. You are the one who's venturing into the unknown, so you can't know. That's a feature of leadership, right? You can't know. Otherwise, it's not leading, right? So there's an element of risk there, and that's okay. That's a feature of leadership, not a bug. And the more we can practice sitting in that tension and discomfort of like, okay, I made a decision and I'm going to own it 100%, like, and just whatever the consequences are, I am going to own my decision and not betray myself and go back and backpedal and be like, oh, I shouldn't have, and sure, like there's things to be said for like receiving feedback and course correcting our behavior for sure. But in this kind of context, it's not about the behavior, it's about the decision, right? And so those are two different things. So there's nuance there, but that's an easy one. And then like another easy one is even when you're at the restaurant, this is something that I try, and it's so funny because I definitely experience discomfort. It's like just opening the menu and like giving yourself 1 minute, like literally putting a timer and putting 1 minute to decide what you're gonna eat, and you just like boom, decide, close it, put it away, and just sit in that decision of like owning this, right? That's a good way to practice like getting more comfortable with this leadership.
Yeah, that's great. And I completely agree. As a man, you really do need to own the decisions that you make. It is super important, even when they turn out to be shit, right? But here's the thing. Here's the thing. If you've done your due diligence ahead of time, right? It's way easier to actually own that decision. So if we take our example of, deciding what restaurant to go to, yeah, I heard there was a new restaurant, but to me, that doesn't mean anything, right? Did somebody I trust actually give it a good recommendation and recommend that I should go there? Did I take 5 minutes or less to grab my phone and go look it up on the internet and read a couple of reviews? Did I look at the menu because I know that my woman has, special dietary needs and I want to make sure that they got something gluten-free or vegetarian or dairy-free or whatever it is that she needs, right? If I've done that due diligence and then I make a decision and then we get there and it turns out to not be good, or they were out of the thing they said they had on their menu that she wanted to eat, right? It's so much easier for me to own that decision because I said, I did my best, right? I gave it my all. I did the research. I asked around. I got on the internet. Like I thought this was a good decision and it didn't work out. Okay. I own it. Right. So I agree with you. Yes. Owning it is absolutely important. And for the men that are afraid to really own their decisions, do your due diligence so that you can say, I did my best. And once you've been able to do that, it's so much easier to own your decision. Now, of course, if your best was really just like really wholly inadequate, then you might want to look at, okay, you got some more work to do here in order, because maybe your best was you saw it on social media and that was really the best that you came up with for trying to figure out whether or not it was a good place. Okay, there's room for improvement there, but in general, if you've done your best, then you can own that decision easier. This where the conversation is going now was really taking me straight into my next question, which was, we're talking about rejection. We kind of covered what rejection is. We've given some good examples to make it more real. And then, of course, the thing is, what can we learn from rejection? And so we started to talk about this a little bit, right? We started talking about some of the things that we could learn from it. But I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that. What types of things might a man learn by going through either, rejection in dating or rejection in their relationship?
Yeah. So I'm very passionate about this topic, just to give the audience a little context as to where I'm coming from. So like I'm also a conscious dating coach. I'm not just a relationship coach. And that's kind of where I've actually spent even more time focused on, and myself as well. And so one of the things that to me, because I'm so interested in personal growth, kind of a personal development junkie, I wanted to get good at like cold approaching women. I wanted to like, not because I necessarily even wanted to date them, but just because I knew I had this fear and I just wanted to conquer it. Like I wanted to figure out how to actually do that and then still like retain my own sense of like intrinsic self-worth. And so that right there is one of the things that you can develop, like sure, in this extreme harsh environment of cold approaching, but also just in the little moments of rejection that can occur, or big moments of rejection that can occur in a relationship, is like, okay, how much am I putting my own value and sense of self-worth into like validation, external validation from this person, even if that's your partner and somebody that you love. Like there, I'm not saying to completely disregard external validation because I think it's important. It's like feedback, right? It gives you feedback, and this is how you can course correct. But I think when we value external validation over our internal validation, that's when there's problems. So like it's okay to still want and be motivated by external validation. We all want to be appreciated. We all want to be acknowledged, and it feels good when our women, our partners can validate us like that, right? We feel good. But if that's the only reason or driving force behind what we're doing, right, then there's an insecurity inside. So through rejection, in those moments of rejection, are these beautiful opportunities to kind of check in, to sit with the tension in your body. Again, I really want to emphasize going into the body because that's really where all the work is done. It's not in the mind. It's not like in this rational thing. It's like feeling into the feeling of rejection. Right? What does rejection feel like in your body in particular? There are certain sensations associated with that. And not just going in and saying, oh, yeah, I'm feeling rejection, but how do you know you're feeling rejected? What does that feel like? So, for example, for me, there could be like a feeling like a warm, kind of uncomfortable, like blanket being draped over my shoulders that makes me feel kind of like small and heavy, and it's not a comfortable feeling. There's like prickly pins on my back. I know those feelings are associated more with like shame for me, which is tied into the feeling of embarrassment and tied into this feeling of like being rejected and inadequate, right? So that's just an example. So by tapping into our bodies, then we really get the opportunity to first sit with it, because that's the first step, and then to like learn to accept it. And then from that space, once you get comfortable, once you stop fearing the feeling of rejection, then you're free, right? You're liberated because now you trust yourself to be able to house and contain this emotion within your body and not be overwhelmed by it. And that just creates a huge amount of internal confidence. That's the self-worth thing that we're talking about, and an outcome independence, right? And so I'll say the last little piece about the outcome independence part. I totally agree with you. Like you, especially if your partner has like dietary needs, do your due diligence ahead of time and plan and do as best as you can. I also think it's important to allow for an element of spontaneity in relationships. Otherwise, everything is just planned and structured, and like there's no fun, there's no like mystery, and like I think that's an important part of it as well. And so balance it out both. Obviously, maybe 80-90% of the time you're planning and creating the space, but then there's also and you don't have to necessarily go to a random restaurant as your thing of spontaneity, but even within the restaurant that you've consciously chosen, you might risk, let me try a little meal here, like let me just do this and inject this sort of spontaneity. And that's what helps you also develop this outcome independence, because you put yourself in that situation of like, I don't know what the outcome is going to be. Sit in that tension. Can you feel into your body? What does it feel like to feel like uncertain? Right. And there's also an element of fun there too. So without going off too far, I would say, just to recap, it's like the intrinsic sense of self-worth and outcome independence are the two biggest things that you can benefit and gain from working through rejection moments.
Yeah, and those two things are huge. They're absolutely huge. And not only are they going to help you, in potentially future rejection moments, but they're going to help you throughout pretty much your entire life. If you can master those skills, you can take those anywhere. You can take them into the workforce. You can take them into your, obviously relationships, like anything, right? That self-confidence and letting go of being attached to the outcome of certain things, those are huge skills to learn. So I think people tend to look at rejection as a bad thing, but if that helps you learn these two skills, then it's amazing, right? So that of course begs the question of like, how then does one do this, right? So because basically what we're saying here is it's an inside job, right? This is not new news. This comes up all the time. It's like, wow, you want to get really good at dealing with rejection, you got to up your self-worth, you got to do the inner work, right? So the same with so many things in life. It's an inside job, but then the question is, how does one do that? So I'm wondering, like, I'm assuming you work with men and helping them do this. What kind of tools and what kind of processes and things would you do to help a man establish more of that self-worth, detaching from the outcome, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I love this question, man. Thank you for asking it. And I'm really excited to share because I created like a little framework. I love creating little fun frameworks that we can just sort of apply, little tools, little methods, right? And so I call it the BRAVE method. And I spell it BRAIVE. So the only difference is there's an I in there. And it's just an acronym, right, for these different words, different steps of the process. And it's really, really simple, right? But before I even go into explaining what each of them is, just for the listener, just understand that there's nothing like crazy. There's nothing magical here. This is not like a revolutionary tool I'm about to share with you. It's a very, very basic stuff. But like that's where the juice is. It's just actually doing it, right? Actually applying it. That's off 90% of the things. It's not that we need more information. It's just we need to embody the information that we already have up here, right? And so, these are very basic things. So brave, what it stands for is, I'll just go through it. It's breathe, recognize, allow, right? Investigate, validate, and then express. So if you're cool, I'll just go really quickly through those and express what those mean. So obviously breathe is really simple. So the first second you have to catch it, right? Like this is why like emotional awareness is so important, because you need to know when you got triggered. What was the exact thing that happened especially if you can catch it in the moment. Like let's say you say something, and your partner just is like, well, whatever, kind of, you feels like kind of dismissed or rejected, right? You feel something like that heat in your chest or whatever. And it's the first thing is just breathe, like just ground yourself a little bit, right? You want to contain that emotion. Like, okay, breathe and then recognize, what is it that I'm actually feeling? That's the R, right? Recognize. Okay, that's where you go in. You start to figure it out. Like, oh, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling that. Like, what is that what's coming up for me? And then you say, oh, I'm feeling kind of rejected right now. Okay, can I now just allow that without trying to change anything, right? Because too many guys, I'm sure like you relate to this, is like so many guys just want to fix it. And that's a beautiful thing that we have. Like that's a gift that guys have, is we have this incredibly practical, rational, analytical mind that wants to fix things. And like, I don't want to take that away from anybody. The thing is, there's an order of operations. And if you skip over the feeling part, if you skip over this critical allowing in your body, then you actually like are sidestepping the growth, right? And this is why you could go and approach a lot of guys. They will go like in the dating space. Let's say you go and approach a woman, they get rejected. They actually get worse. They don't get better. They because they're not actually going in and feeling it and allowing it and working through it and extracting the gold and the wisdom and then up leveling. Instead, they don't know how to do that. So then they try to fix the problem, and then they're like, well, fixing it is either not approaching anymore, or developing this huge armor so that like I don't care and I'm aloof and everything, right? So these coping mechanisms in order to try to fix the problem, right? But you got to feel it first. So breathe, recognize, allow, just allow the sensations to be there without trying to change them. Then investigate. Once you kind of allow them, you're like, okay, this is uncomfortable. I'm feeling this tension, whatever it is, whether it's rejection, guilt, shame. I'm allowing it to be there. It's contained. Now investigate. And so this is where you ask literally the part of you that is feeling that, what do you need me to know? Right? What's important for me to know about the situation? What would you have me do right now? Right? What do you need from me? These are incredibly important questions, very simple, but just asking that and then listening to yourself, to those parts of you as they're starting to share. Well, the thing is, like, she rejected us and like it means she doesn't care about us, and now like we're disrespected, and like you got to go and say something to her, right? And then so you just listen to that. It doesn't mean you do it, right? But you just listen. And this is where you go into the next step, which is the V, right? The validating. Now you don't have to agree with what's coming up for you, but you do have to validate it. Just like you don't have to agree with your child, like with what their fears are. If they have a fear that there's a monster under the bed, you don't have to agree with it, But if you tell them there's no monster under your bed, you're dismissing their emotions, you're dismissing their experience, you're not empathizing with it. So you have to validate and say, I can understand why you would feel like there's a monster under bed, sweetie. And if I thought there was a monster under my bed, I would also feel scared, right? That's validation. You're not saying there is a monster under your bed. You're also not saying there's not. It's the same thing. You go in, you're checking, you're in that investigative state. This comes up, it says, hey, like you felt rejected and you're disrespected. Now you got to go retaliate or whatever it is, right? Okay, like I can understand why you would feel that way, right? Like if I got rejected, if I felt disrespected like that by somebody that I love, of course we're going to feel that way, right? That's okay to feel that way. And as soon as you start to do that, as soon as you start to validate, what happens to like use a child as an example, they're like pulling at your pant legs, like mommy, mommy, or daddy, daddy. And you're just like, hold on, hold on, hold on, right? And they're gonna get louder and louder and louder and louder until you acknowledge them. And it's like, what? Like, there's a monster in my bed. And you're like, oh, sweetie, I'm so sorry. Like, and you validate, then they relax because they feel seen, they feel heard. It's the same exact thing with ourselves and our own emotions. So we're feeling this feeling of rejection. I'm not good enough. We're disrespected. And then you just sit with it. Oh, yeah, that's okay, though. We're allowed to feel rejected. We're allowed to feel not good enough. Like, that's okay. And I understand why it would feel so hard, but I'm here for myself. And all of a sudden, those inner child start to feel heard. That emotion starts to relax because the only reason it's coming up is to try to get your attention so you can acknowledge it. Once you acknowledge it, because it has information for you, once you receive that information, it doesn't need to be there anymore. It doesn't need to be as loud. And then finally, the express step, right? Let's validate and express. Now it's like, what do I actually do about this, right? I may need to express this actually to my partner. And so the best way to do this is not to retaliate, is to express your emotions. Actually let her know what you're feeling. Let her into your inner world. This is vulnerable to do, but this is also what the masculine leader does, right? This is what creates actual safety because now she's connected to you. And so, hey, baby, you know what? I was sitting with it and like that comment that you made, actually, I was feeling rejection in my body. Make sure you keep it on yourself and not say, you rejected me, because that's a projection. Like, no, what happened is I felt rejected when you said that. And I understand that may not have been your intention, but that's how I felt. And I was wondering if we could kind of like work through it together to figure out what we could do differently next time, right? You're expressing it. Now you've received the wisdom. Something about that didn't feel good. You don't have to have all the answers, but just bring it up, share your piece of it vulnerably, and invite her into a conversation about it. And you guys can figure out what happened. And then you get the opportunity for her to get to know you better. And she's like, oh, I didn't realize that when I say that one thing, it really triggers you. I'm sorry, baby. Like, I didn't mean to do that. And now you feel heard. There's resolution to what actually happened. And now she'll be more mindful of not saying those things in the future. That's all I can say.
Well, you said a lot, and the framework is great. And what I love about it is anybody that's listening right now can literally take that framework that you just said and use it right away. That's one of the things I love to do in this show, is to give people tools that they can take away from it, so that they didn't just listen to it and go, oh, that's great, but it's going to take me 10 years of therapy to be able to do that, right? Like, that's something they could do right now. Now, obviously, portions of that can be challenging, especially depending on the situation in which you're applying it to. So it might still be very helpful to work with somebody like yourself in order to go through that process. But what you gave them already was very, very valuable. So I want to thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for giving me the space. And for the listener, I know that could be a lot to swallow all at one time as well, but even if you did a few of those steps, like the ones that really stuck out to you, if you just implement that, like you're still going to get like 1% better, right? So don't feel like you need to do every single step in exactly the same order and everything. Like, just trust yourself as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to move on in just a moment to the rupture moments, but I'm curious, is there anything else that you want to share with the audience when it comes to rejection before we move on?
I just want to share like a quick little story for me personally of a rejection moment that was a big, powerful shift for me, and me applying like where this brave method came from. I'll keep it as concise as possible. I was just at this show, and there was like this really cute girl that I saw. This was when I was like single in my days, and I was like still into that cold approaching thing. And so like I saw this girl, I like go up to her, we're talking, but then there was this big commotion that happened, and we kind of got like separated, and I was like, oh, I saw her at the other end of the room, and I was like, I'll approach her later. It's kind of just like we got interrupted, whatever. But then literally like a minute later, I see her like walking towards the exit door, and she had to pass right by me to go to the exit door. And I was like, oh man, she's about to leave. Like I saw her saying bye to her friends and stuff. And I was like, it's now or never. So as she's passing, I'm just like, it was like a very spontaneous thing. And I'm like, hey, and I had like nothing to say. I had no line. I was just like, I was like, uh, would you want to go out sometime? And she like literally like kind of like looks me up and down and was just like, I'm gonna say no. And then she just like walked out. And I was just like, like totally just like shame and guilt and rejection, all that stuff. And I was literally like in mid conversation with like a buddy of mine, and like he saw the whole thing too. So it was just like, it's just like this. And I didn't even tell him like, hold on. I literally like she was passing by and I just like completely shifted attention. He was probably like, what the heck? So it was just like this moment of a lot of shame. And I had this temptation to leave the venue and go home and just like literally just go by myself. But I was like, this is an opportunity right here. And so I literally sat down. I found like a little quiet spot in the venue and I sat down and I just closed my eyes. I put my hand over my heart, another one over my solar plexus. And I just like, literally did, this was like the genesis of the Brave method. I just went in and I was like, what's coming up right now? And all I heard, I was like, all I felt was like this feeling of shame, that heavy blanket. I was like, okay, what do you need me to know? Right. And it was just like, well, like we're not good enough, obviously. Right. Like this woman just rejected us. And that's when I was like, yeah, I can totally understand that this feeling sucks, but I'm here and I allow it. Right. And then I remember at a certain point, I was like talking to my inner child and I was just like, like, does this woman even really know us? I just started asking questions and it was like, well, not really. I'm like, yeah, she kind of only met us for like a few minutes, right? Like, how deeply do you think she could know us? Also, it was like, what if she was like a lesbian? Like, she could have been a lesbian. We have no idea. Like, we don't even know her that well, right? So I started asking these questions and just kind of challenging the belief that I'm not good enough. And eventually it started to calm down, and I just was there for my part. I literally just sat there in the venue like this for like 10 to 15 minutes and I was in my own world. And then after just sitting with it, validating it, it just calmed down. And I was like, I opened my eyes and I was like, oh, I'm good. And I just like got up, started socializing again, and it was as if it never happened. And like that was a turning point where I realized I was like, wow, like this something so powerful here about just sitting with it. And that's what then I started to actually do more cold approaching to the point where it just that feeling came up and passed in like a few seconds. And I was able to alchemize that emotion of rejection so quickly. And every time that I did, I got more and more confident, more and more secure, more and more outcome independent until I could just approach practically any girl that I wanted to. And even if I got rejected, I wouldn't experience the feeling of rejection because I was just like, oh, okay, no worries. Have a good one. Take care. Bye. So I just want to share that as a like I know a lot of the guys might be in relationships, but take that extreme example and apply it to your relationship in in a moment where you might feel rejected, right? And just make sure that you sit with it and validate yourself through that experience because it's you're worthy of it. So I'll just say that.
Yeah, it's a great example. And, there's a couple of things I wanted to share about that. The first one is if there's any ladies listening, which normally there are, although our episode today is a little bit more focused on men, but realize the impact that you actually have on men, right? So in other words, like, and this kind of brings me to my second point too, which is, you said, well, she could have been a lesbian for all I know, right? Yes, she could have been a lesbian and not into guys. She could have had a boyfriend. She could have been having a bad day. Like there could have been a million reasons that had nothing to do with you whatsoever. So that's a valid point to make, right? But then also, from the lady's point of view, like when you respond, think about how you respond. Nobody's saying that you need to say yes if you don't want to say yes, but like giving him the stare up and down and like the look and then like no kind of thing instead of no thank you and just walking out the door. Like, I'm not sure women necessarily always understand the impact they have, right? Because in that moment, like obviously if they're a pickup artist guy, they don't bat an eye and they're just like, okay, next, right? And they're on to the next one. But for somebody who's being really genuine, right, and somebody who tends to be a bit more sensitive, like you said yourself, I wanted to go leave the venue, right? And you had to go through a process at that point in order to kind of get past it. So I would hope that the ladies listening would understand that, you can have a pretty big impact. And then, of course, on the side of the men, don't take things so personally, right? Because you have no idea what's going on the other end. So,
Exactly.
but it's
Love that.
a great example. Okay, I need to take a break for my second sponsor. When we come back, I want to talk about rupture moments and what they are, uh, how to deal with them. Um, we might even see that they have some things in common with what we've been talking about so far. Okay, men, are you tired of falling short in the bedroom and in your relationships? Do you want your woman to respect you and crave your cock? Do you want to be the man she secretly brags about to all her friends? What if you could become this man? What if you could not only master your masculine sexuality, but also be the dream man who shows up for his woman in all the ways she desires? What if you could become so irresistible that she becomes addicted to you? If you are ready to become that man, then go to kevinanthonycoaching.com/men. That is kevinanthonycoaching.com/men. That is obviously a link to my men's coaching program. We work on all kinds of stuff. If you've listened to the show for any length of time, you have a pretty good idea of what we will cover in that coaching program. All right. So let's move on to what we call rupture moments. So, can you explain to the listeners what a rupture moment is?
Yeah, so this is like not from Webster's dictionary. This is like my own personal definition of it. I like to keep the definition somewhat general, but then go into the nuances. I would just list the rupture moment as any moment, whether like small or big, of like moment of disconnection or disharmony that occurs in your relationship with your partner or with anybody, right? Like a family or a friend. It can happen with any relationship. And Gabor Mate uses like capital T trauma for like those big events, that happen in our childhood, like divorce or war or rape, but then there's also little T trauma, which are the good things that should have happened for us but didn't. And so those oftentimes don't get seen as trauma, but they actually do cause trauma. But it's those little T traumas. And so in a similar way, we have like big R rupture moments like cheating, divorce, things of that nature. But, we also have little R rupture moments where it could be just a simple moment of like, again, back to the rejection, feeling rejected, and there's a disconnect there now, right? Or feeling like judged, right? There's a disconnect or a lack of trust. Like maybe your partner said they were going to do something, they didn't do it. And now, even if they didn't mean it, and now there's a disconnect. Or another example is like maybe they forget a really important birthday or anniversary, and then that just felt like a big betrayal to you. Right? You felt like you didn't care. And so there's this disconnect. So in that moment of disconnect or disharmony, that's where the opportunity is.
Yeah, absolutely. And you did a perfect job of tying these two topics together, which is that a rupture moment could be a rejection, right? It could be a lot of other things also, but it could also be a rejection. So all that stuff that we were talking about uh, earlier in the show about rejection, one of those moments could create a rupture moment, which is a moment where we have this disconnect with our partner. I think most people listening to the show can understand what we mean when we say we have this moment of disconnect. I'm wondering though, kind of like you did with the uh, rejection, maybe some examples of like what kinds of smaller T types of rupture moments might one experience in their relationship?
Mm. Yeah, so I think this is a good maybe moment to before diving into the examples is to maybe outline a little bit of like I guess I'll speak from my experiences that um, a rupture moment can definitely occur because like you as the man feels like something happened and now you're pulling and disconnected. Um, and obviously it can happen if like the woman is feeling disconnected. For me personally, based off of my attachment style, which is I lean a little bit like in the past, let's say I'd like to think I'm secure now, but like in the past, and if I'm not careful, the tendencies that will come up is that I lean a little bit more dismissive, right? Avoidant, dismissive, avoidant. And so because of that, oftentimes I feel like, oh, I'm connected, everything's fine, but she's not feeling connected, right? So I think this is important to recognize because whereas like in the rejection example, it's very much about our experience in a rupture moment, like especially those little t rupture, little r ruptures, right? It can very much be about her experience. And so now there's like a slight shift in the role. But what's interesting is actually the brave method, you can actually still apply that, but you just apply it to the woman now, or you just apply it to your partner. And it's the exact same thing. You're just doing it for her inner child now instead of your inner child, right? And so I just want to lay that as like some context. So some common like rupture moments that happen in my relationship, right? And my partner, she again, I would say like she's secure, but in our weakest moments, her tendencies lean a little bit more anxious. And so moments where she feels disconnected, like it's like a little rupture moment, is like if I forget to text her like on a particular day, or I don't text her, I don't send her like a good morning text, or if like I go all day and I haven't even messaged her or called her and I'm just like working all day or whatever, I'm really in the zone. That to her is a big feeling of disconnect. Even though I personally don't feel disconnected, for her, that's like a rupture moment. And so you can experience a rupture moment because it takes two to tango, right? You could be like dancing and be like, "Oh, I'm perfectly over here dancing," but it's like your partner is not following you or she's like disconnected, then like you're not actually dancing, right? And so that's still a rupture moment, even if you might not feel it in yourself. And it's still your responsibility to get her to feel connected to you, even if you feel connected to her. So let me pause there and see where you want to kind of like take that.
Yeah, I think that's good. The main thing that I really wanted people to understand was, and you did such a good job of explaining, like the word rupture kind of sounds big, right? So this is like the big R's versus the little R's. I wanted people to understand that rupture moments could be smaller things too. And in fact, the smaller rupture moments are probably much more common than the bigger
Yeah,
rupture moments. And that was really kind of the main point. And that's why I like giving some examples of like how this sort of plays out
right.
in people's relationships. So, because, sometimes if we didn't explain that, somebody might say, oh yeah, we don't have those, that's fine, right? Because
Right.
we didn't have some major we almost broke up kind of moment, right?
Right.
But there may be a whole bunch of other smaller things that are being overlooked because you're not maybe recognizing them for what they are.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm happy to list more. So I mean, that's one of them right there. What I mentioned about like some like a partner not messaging, not like for example, where this is the root of for my partner. It's important for her to know that I'm thinking about her when I'm not with her. And the way that she knows that is when I tell her, "Hey, I'm thinking about you. Hey, like how's your day going?" Right? Even though for me, like it's not as important, right? So those are like that's like a little R rupture moment that happens. And if I'm not on top of like making sure that I'm messaging her, right? And it doesn't mean I have to like go completely out of my way and now I'm obligated to do this thing. It just means I want to do that thing because like I want my partner to feel connected to me. So that's like a moment, right? Where it's very easy to send a message like, "Hey, I got home safe," but or whatever the case may be. Another thing would be like this is another common one, which is like not standing up for your partner, right, in the face of somebody else or playing devil's advocate, right, like to your partner, right, when it's like they need your support in that moment, even if you don't agree with them. Like this goes back to the like not jumping to the fixing it piece. It's like you can talk to your partner about maybe where they are not having an open mind about their own behavior or reflecting deeply enough or whatever. But in the moment when they're upset, when somebody says something to them, whether it's their parents, like if you're going to Christmas or like Thanksgiving and then you're around parents and somebody says something and then you're like, you laugh at that or you like kind of, you're like, oh, she didn't mean it like that. Like, if like your mother said something to her, like those are little moments of disconnection, right? Those little rupture moments where like she feels disconnected because she wanted you to stand up for her, or she wanted you to at least like support her and encourage her and recognize that, validate her. That's really what she wanted, is the validation, right? Which, back to the brave method. So those are like two examples. I'm happy to list more. I'm also happy to hear any examples that you've seen.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's good. I think that does a pretty good job of explaining to people, what they are. Again, the main point, I just wanted them to understand, how these things show up in relationship because they're not always so easy to recognize.
Right.
This, of course, takes us to the next step. And you mentioned that, the brave framework will work here. But let's just say you're in that situation and you notice that she's feeling disconnected. What are some ways that you can uh, reconnect and create that sense of connection maybe that's missing in that moment?
Yeah. So, it's funny because I actually created another framework specifically for the other way around. I said you can apply the brave method, and you can, and that'll still work, but there's the one that's a little bit more like focused on that. And like, I'm not going to go into it as deeply because now you guys already understand the brave method and it's similar. So I'll just go quickly through it. So I call it the silver tongue technique because really it's like if you can learn how to do this, like you can really help to reconnect your woman, like lead her and guide her back into her heart, and you yourself back into your heart as well. And you can really lead the relationship back into that connection, back into that place of harmony, right? And that's that's the repair, right? So from rupture to repair. And every time you do that, and if you like master this framework and you can do this consistently, every single time you do that, you're building more and more trust, more and more love with your partner, and she respects you more, she trusts you more, she feels safe, right? And it doesn't mean that next time there's a rupture moment, she won't still like challenge you, right? And you can't necessarily just bank on all the times that you've done in the past and be like, but I did it all those other times. It's like, well, it matters now. So you got to show up right now. So the silver tongue technique is just silver, and it's just sit in silence, inhale, listen to what she's actually expressing, right? And if she's not expressing anything, that's when you can actually ask her like, "Hey, what's coming up for you, baby? I feel you disconnected. What's coming up?" Right? And then listen, and then validate, right? The same thing, it's the V in the silver, and express or empathize. Sorry, empathize, and then reflect. And so this one here is really interesting because if there's one piece of that that I'll just hyper focus on, you don't have to worry about memorizing that another acronym and everything because I know it's gonna get complicated, is really just the reflecting piece. This is the practical piece here that we can really take. If there's one thing you can take away from this entire podcast, it would be this for me. And it would be that when your partner is disconnected, when they're upset, when she's saying something to you, don't get sucked into the argument, right? Because once you get sucked in there, you already know what's going to happen. You're going to get defensive. You're going to start explaining yourself and be like, I didn't mean it like that. I was doing blah, blah, blah. And then all of that is just creating invalidation in her. So instead, the easiest way to help her feel seen is literally so easy. It's just to reflect back to her what she is saying. It's the easiest thing ever. And so if she's like, I felt like when, your mother said that comment to me and you kind of laughed, I felt like kind of disrespected, like you agreed with her and like that made me upset. Okay, baby. So let me see if I get this right. Right. So what you're saying is that in that moment that my mother said that comment to you and I laughed, you felt like disrespected because I wasn't there for you in that moment. Did I get that right? And you want to check in. You want to keep doing this. Did I get that right? Am I understanding you correctly? Right. And you want to look for those yeses, right? Because every single time you get a yes, it's like you're inching closer to connection, inching closer to reconnection, right? And you don't even have to agree with what she is saying, but you have to validate it, right? And that's part of the reflecting. And then you're like, okay, so she says yes. If she says no, be like, okay, then help me understand. I want to understand, baby. Get a yes, and then once you get a yes, then it's like, okay, what else is important for me to know about the situation? What else do you want to share with me, right? And you do it again. You just repeat, rinse and repeat the same thing. Okay, so what I hear you saying is, and then you repeat what she said, reflect back to her. Did I get that right? Am I understanding that correctly? She says yes. Okay, is there anything else? And you just keep doing this over and over until she's like, oh, no, that's it. You got it. Okay, Now pause before, right? Because that in that moment now it's like, okay, now I want to share my side of the story. But if you just rush into that, you completely like just ruin the work that you just spent so long doing, right? And so just sitting in that pausing moment for a second, putting your hand on, on her leg or whatever, just like holding her hand. And, if you feel like there's an apology that's warranted, like just give it. Even if you don't feel like this is an apology that's warranted, like you can apologize for accidentally doing something, right? Like you can accidentally bump into somebody and be like, "Well, I didn't mean it. Why would I have to apologize? I didn't try to hurt this person." But you know that it means a lot to them to hear it, so why not just say, "Hey, sorry, man. I didn't mean to bump into you." It's the same thing, right? Like in this moment, be like, "Baby, that was definitely not my intention, but I see how that made you feel, and I'm sorry." And that's it. Like just let that land. Let her kind of sit with that and let her tell you what she needs. And that you can actually ask her, "What do you need from me right now?" Right? And that's it. And then just like have that conversation, explore that, see where it goes. And if you're able to do the thing that she needs, do it. She might just need some reassurance. She might just need you to hold her for a moment. She might just need some touch, right? She might need an apology if you haven't already apologized. Or she might need some reassurance that's not going to happen again. Be like, I'll do my best and I'll be mindful so in the future this doesn't happen again. Right? Thank you for sharing that. Boom. And then by that point, you don't even really need to express your side of the story. Now, if you feel like you need to because inside you're like, it's eating you alive, that's when you lead with the emotions again, back to the brave method, back to the expressing piece, right? This is where you're like, okay, I appreciate all that, baby, and I just want to let you know what's coming up for me. Are you open to receiving this? And if she's open to it, then just say, I hear what you're saying, and I can't help but to feel a little bit like this, a little bit like this. And this doesn't invalidate what you're saying, right? This is just how what's coming up for me. I know it's not true. I know it wasn't your intention. And then you express your side of the story, right? So yeah, let me pause there because I know that's a lot.
No, that was great. I mean, what you're describing really is a foundational piece of communication, one that I teach all my clients. It's basically, I don't call it the silver tongue technique. Personally, I strive for the gold tongue technique. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But whatever helps people remember it. But that is such an important key piece of how you communicate that repeating back and then asking for clarification and going through that process until you come to a mutual understanding is huge. And what's interesting, I've taught that to a lot of couples that I've worked with, and it kind of blows their mind every time, and yet it's so simple, right? It's like how were we never taught this in our lives? Like, okay, hold on, let me pause for a moment, let me think about what you just said. Let me make sure I understand it by repeating it back to you, getting your feedback, right? Like it sounds so simple, and yet it's something that so many people have such difficulty with, especially when they're in the moment of being triggered, right? And the
Mm.
emotions are running. That gets a whole lot more difficult to do, right? Which is why it's good sometimes to have acronyms to be like, wait a minute, what am I supposed to do? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, if you can come up with an acronym for gold, man, let me know, man. I might take it from you.
I'll think about that. Okay, so we covered what a rupture moment is. We showed how it related to what we were talking about with rejection. We also expanded upon what rupture moments are. We gave some tools that you can literally use right now when you have rupture moments to try to get back to reconnection. Is there any last things you want to share about rupture moments before we wrap up today?
Yeah, I guess in a similar way, I'll just share like a quick story that I think just ties it all, you know, and it's more of like an allegory than it is a story. But, I remember the first time that I really did this for my partner, and it was just like we were in a moment of like a little small rupture moment. There was a disconnection. Like I had sent her this very vulnerable text expressing a lot of like really vulnerable things that I wanted her support with. And I think it was a long text and she was like overwhelmed by it. And so she actually didn't respond back to me for like a whole day. I think like I went to sleep and there was no text in the morning. There's still no text, and it was like I don't think she even responded to it. I think I ended up calling her. It was just like, hey, like I feel like a little bit like this is kind of like the rejection thing, you know? I was like, I felt a little bit like I just opened my heart and soul and like not even a single text, not even like a, hey, like I need some time to process this, but I'll get back to you. It was just like ghosted or something, right? And I was feeling super disconnected. She was feeling disconnected. And so we finally like met up. And I remember into that, I had this framework that I just created. And I was like, I'm going to try this. Like, I'm going to try to go into this and like use this framework. I'm going to keep myself accountable because it's so easy, like you said, to like just get kind of like what am I supposed to do again, like you know, so it's good to have like a little thing. So I applied this and I just remember reflecting back to her over and over and over again, and I literally just saw Kevin like her entire like just demeanor change and melt, like her bitterness or her disconnection just melt right in front of me. And then like towards the end of it, she was just giving me these like googly eyes, man. Like, you know, these just like she was just so like in awe of what had just happened, right? Because I don't think she'd ever experienced it before. And I was in awe of what just happened because I had never actually like did that in such a smooth way and led us both back to our hearts and both back into that repair, right? From that little rupture. And man, it just built so much trust, but also so much intimacy. I think we probably just went and made love right afterwards because there was all of this emotions now and we were super connected. So I guess the main takeaway is just simply that like while I wouldn't ever advocate to consciously or create, like intentionally create a rupture moment, like they're a feature of relationships. Relationships are harmony and disharmony, harmony and disharmony. That's actually life, right? And so, like this is not a bug. It's something actually to know that it's a reality, and to when it does come up, it's like wow, reframing it and thinking like this mindset of like wow, here's a really golden opportunity to really like to actually bring us into repair. And every time you do that, you actually like it's like you're going to the gym and you're tearing muscle and then you're feeding it, it grows larger, right? That's literally the perfect analogy for your relationship. Every time you successfully repair a rupture moment, the relationship grows stronger. But just like if you go to the gym and you work out, but then you don't feed your body the adequate levels of protein and all the other stuff that's needed, you're actually damaging your body. Same thing. If you don't have a system for actually bringing ruptures back into repair, disharmony back into harmony, then you're actually damaging the relationship. And this is where resentment starts to build over years and years and years. So you definitely need to learn a strategy for that. And once you do, every single time that a repair or rupture moment happens, it's a beautiful golden opportunity to deepen the intimacy and trust.
Absolutely. Now, we can't guarantee that every time you repair a rupture moment, you're going to end up having great sex afterwards, but it does happen sometimes.
I wish we could.
All right, Danny, we are actually out of time for this episode, but I really appreciated you coming on and sharing your knowledge and wisdom, and tell the listeners where they can find more about you if they're interested in working with you.
Yeah, thank you. So the easiest place would just be Instagram at the Danny Salinas, or LinkedIn at Danny Salinas, or my website at thedannysalinas.com. So those three places. Instagram, I'm probably a little bit the most active on there. So, you know, that'd be the greatest. You can see my content and, you know, just shoot me a message, say what's up. And I'm happy to just meet you and get to know you and help in any way that I can.
Awesome. And of course, those links are in the description. So go check that out if you're interested in wanting to work with Danny or following Danny and seeing what's going on in his world. All right. One last time, I want to thank you for coming on the show and sharing your knowledge.
Thank you so much for having me on here, Kevin. This was a lot of fun, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
All right, everybody. That's all the time I have for this episode, and I will see you next week. I hope you liked this episode of the Love Lab podcast. If you enjoy this show, subscribe, leave me a review, and share it with your friends. And for more free exclusive content, join me in the Passion Vault at kevinanthonycoaching.com/vault. That's kevinanthonycoaching.com/vault. Thanks for listening. And remember, as Celine used to say, You're amazing.